All right, welcome to this edition of the Native News Update. I'm your host for today's program, Paul Demain. Many of the stories read on this news broadcast can also be found at our website at IndianCountryNews.com. Here are the news stories for the day from the Associated Press and other Native American news sources. Richard Marshall, charged with killing a fellow American Indian Movement member in December of 1975, must stay in jail until his trial. A federal magistrate ruled April 13th. Marshall and John Graham pled not guilty to charges they committed and aided or abetted the murder of Anime Piktuakwash near Wombly on the Pine Ridge Reservation. Their trial is set to start May 12th in Rapid City. Marshall's lawyer, Dana Hanna, filed an application for pretrial release last week and introduced letters of support into evidence, including one signed by about 140 of the several thousand tribal members living on the Pine Ridge Reservation where Marshall is from. U.S. Attorney Marty Jackley argued that Marshall is charged with having a gun and being an accessory in a crime of violence that carries a life sentence in prison, was twice arrested after chases with authorities, and has already been convicted of murder. U.S. Magistrate Veronica Duffy said, given the crime and the penalty you're facing and the unanswered question of your substance abuse, I find you're a flight risk, she said to Richard Marshall and his attorney, Dana Hanna. Clark County, Washington State Commissioners voted to kill a revenue sharing deal with the Cowlitz tribe for a proposed casino near La Center, Washington. It's still up to the federal government to approve the casino. The Vancouver Columbian reports the deal gave legitimacy to the plan that the commissioners now oppose. A lawyer for the tribe, Steve Horenstein, says regardless of the commission's vote, the terms of the 2004 agreement are still legally binding. A conservation group has sued the Department of Interior over the government's plan to manage the National Bison Range on the Flathead Reservation near Missoula, Montana. The Blue Goose Alliance says the proposed partnership with the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes to manage the wildlife refuge breaks several federal laws and policies and will disrupt nationwide oversight of the area, putting the bison at risk. Under the agreement, the government will own and operate the range indefinitely, but tribal employees will have substantial involvement in the day-to-day decisions and operations. Environmentalists have worried that tribal management might lead to reduced stewardship. Officials at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which oversees the wildlife refuge system, said they had not seen the Blue Goose lawsuit and could not comment. But Rob McDonald, the spokesman for the Confederated Tribes, called the claims colorful and not always fact-based. Montana's Department of Corrections is striving to work more effectively with its largest group of minority inmates, Native Americans. Indians make up about 7% of the state of Montana's population, but represent a much larger chunk of the prison population. Among men, 19.5% of inmates are Native American. At the women's prison, Indians make up just more than 27% of the inmate population in 2008. Felony crimes on reservations are prosecuted by the federal government, so those offenders would have nothing to do with the Montana Department of Corrections. Even so, many Native American inmates in Montana's correction system are steeped in traditional culture, says Myrna Kuka, American Indian liaison for the DOC. Kuka is at the forefront of the effort to bridge the cultural gap. In the Indian liaison position, she plays several roles. With employees, the DOC faces a different problem, a disproportionately low number of Native employees, so Kuka works to recruit Native Americans. Another part of her job is to help Indian inmates and their families understand the corrections system. She also trains fellow staff members in Native American culture and helps adapt DOC policy to work with Indian culture. The Indian liaison position is fairly new. It was established just about 6 years ago. That office is part of an ongoing effort to respect Native American culture in the corrections system, said Mike Ferreter, director of the Montana Department of Corrections. Delegates to a constitutional convention have approved a new draft constitution for the White Earth Reservation in northern Minnesota, which would remake its government. The draft provides for a separation of powers among the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. It will also replace the chairman's job with the president. In another change, new legislative council members will have 2 seats reserved for BAM members who live off the reservation but live within the state of Minnesota. The plan would also establish new membership guidelines that eliminate blood quantum rules. Before the Constitution can take effect, it must be approved in referendum of the White Earth tribal members. No date has been set for that vote as of yet. Interim Tribal Chairman Cedric Black Eagle will face Leroy Not Afraid for the chairman's post on the Crow Reservation in Montana during tribal elections April 18th. Black Eagle received more than 60% of the votes in a primary election last month to win one of 2 spots in the general election ballot. Black Eagle received 2,169 votes and Not Afraid tallied 389. Black Eagle had just started his second 4-year term as vice chair of the tribe when Chairman Carl Venn passed away on February 15th. As specified in the Crow Constitution, Black Eagle stepped in as interim chairman until the election is held. Leroy Not Afraid is the Justice of the Peace for Bighorn County and a former member of the Crows Tribe Executive Committee. 10 candidates were on the primary ballot. Doug Boot says he's contacting many people in the Native community to inform them of an editorial that appeared in the Chicago Sun-Times, and it was entitled, "How Did a Fraud Like Churchill Get So Far?" That editorial appeared in the Sunday, April 12th edition of the Chicago Sun-Times. The piece blasts Churchill for fraudulently claiming to be 3/16 Native American, and rightly so, says Boot. However, it goes on to call the giving of smallpox lace blankets by the U.S. government as a bogus story. Boot wrote a letter to the editor criticizing the paper's dismissal of an actual historical event and was urging others to make their voices heard by also contacting the Sun-Times in an effort to educate its readers about this issue. The editorial can be read at www.suntimes.com. And that is the latest roundup of news from Indian Country on this edition of the Native News Update. We want to thank our underwriters for helping with this broadcast and you for joining us for another day of Native News. Thank you.